Welcome!
Hello!
Happy Sunday, everyone. It is a very special Sunday. We always say that, but it is a very special Sunday.
Well,
because we've been waiting for this one for a hot minute. All of you guys have. And we're really excited to be with our girl crush and a favorite person in the world, Dr. Katie Woodley, the natural pet doctor, talking all things prescription diets.
So this is something that's been long awaited. So I just want to say extra thank you for taking the time to give us all some of your knowledge about this, because it can be a really scary topic for a lot of people. So for everyone that's joining us here, we got a bunch of people jumping on live. For anyone that may not know you, could you please give everyone just a little intro and remind everyone of
so thanks again for having me. I enjoy our time together. So I appreciate you bringing me on here live to help cat parents all over the world. And for everyone joining live and taking time to learn a little bit more, I appreciate each and every one of you. This is how we help our cats feel their best and live their best lives. And so a little bit of a background about myself. So I'm Dr. Katie Woodley. I'm a holistic integrative veterinarian with my own business, The Natural Pet Doctor. So essentially what I look at is how can we use food as medicine? How can we use acupuncture, integrate Western and other types of herbs and Chinese herbal medicine to really help our pets thrive, to heal the root causes of disease rather than treating symptoms? And so we use a lot of different modalities like essential oils, Chinese herbs, acupuncture, looking at what's going on the energetic side, the stress levels. So looking at everything in the house, the environment, and how it all plays a part to what's going on in your cat's life that is either helping or inhibiting them from achieving living their best lives. So that's a little bit about me. You can find more at thenaturalpetdoctor.com.
Okay, so the prescription diets, it's a scary, what do we have to say?
No, I was saying this is a great segue into what we're talking about today, because it's all about, I just lost what I had in my head.
Well, we're contacted a lot by people that are really concerned, saying,
daily.
Their cats are on a prescription diet. They are afraid to look into, they know how we feel about nutrition and quality proteins and stuff like that, but they feel very afraid to even do anything to switch up their diet, because the reason that they're on a prescription diet is because something went wrong. So I think that as much as it is really a kind of a passion topic for Jay and I to discuss prescription diets, as we've been faced with that decision as well, I think it's really important to hear some of the truth about this from a veterinarian that really understands what this is and what it means and why this is going on.
So, because we do on a daily basis, and I'm sure you get this a lot too, but on a daily basis, people are always commenting, messaging, whatever. My cat has to be on this diet. My cat has to be fed this diet because of A, B, or C. A lot of times it's a urinary issue. Sometimes it's kidneys, sometimes it's IBD, but it's been recommended by their vets and oftentimes sold by their vets. And that's the only place they can get it. And they're paying a really high penny for this very specialty food. And I think there's a disconnect between understanding what a prescription diet is versus just, feeding whatever it is that your veterinarian has given to you. So if you could maybe just give a little overview of what prescription diets are, or veterinary diets, or RX diets, or whatever they call them.
Yeah. And so I think the biggest thing too, as we're talking, we always do have to mention, like when we're talking about diets and talking about changing your cats off of a prescription diet, I always do recommend having that conversation with your veterinarian. Now, I completely understand and can relate, because I have a lot of clients that I tell them to change off of these diets onto fresh food diets and other types of brands. And so I know not every veterinarian is open to it. And here's the thing. I used to be in that camp where I thought those were the right diets for that pet. So if your veterinarian is prescribing that food to help them, they're actually doing what they think is best for that pet. So never think that they're trying to harm them or they're just trying to get money. This is what we're taught in vet school. We're taught by those big pet food companies. And we're actually taught this is the protocol you follow to help them. So we honestly feel like we are doing the best, but as you start diving into nutrition and you start going deeper into what are these ingredients, how are pet foods being made, you quickly realize that there's a lot better way to feed our pets. And that's a path I've taken over the past few years and have become really passionate about, because I've been able to see cats with kidney disease reverse their kidney disease by going onto raw food diets and off of prescription diets. I've had cats that have had urinary blockages never block again when we address the root causes. So that doesn't just mean diet, that means looking at the environment, looking at the stress levels, because food is really, really important. Food is medicine, and it is the foundation of health. But if we're missing that the cats are fighting, or that I'm really, really stressed out and I'm not addressing that, my cat's picking that up, that's going to create inflammation in the body. That's probably leading to the urinary tract problem. So I think that's really important to keep in the back of your mind if you have a cat with one of these conditions that we're talking about. And this is the reason why we're feeding the foods. Now, here's the thing. With our prescription diets, when we're looking at prescription foods and we're looking at normal diets, there is a time and a place to tweak and adjust the food. Like, that's important. Some pets will do better with higher fiber diets. Sometimes we need to manipulate carb content, protein content. With cats are obligate carnivores. They need a high level of protein. And a lot of times these cats are on dry food diets that are high carbohydrates, and it's not working well for them, which can actually lead to the condition that we're trying to treat. So that's very, very important to keep in the back of your mind also. But here's the thing. When we think about prescription, we think about prescription medications, right? And that should be well controlled, should be is the keyword there, should be well controlled by the FDA, right? And it's where you go to your doctor, you could have a prescription for a conventional medication, and it's supposed to treat a problem. Well, we would think about that the same, right? It should be technically, right? A prescription food. Your veterinarian can only write a prescription. However, the FDA does not regulate it. The way that term is being thrown around is actually a marketing term. Correct. It is not a prescription food. And you're going to see, we're going to showcase some of these labels, and you're going to see that they are very similar to non-prescription diets. Right. And so this is where I think it's important to ask the veterinarian, well, what is the difference between this food? I was looking at the ingredient list. I'd love for us to just have a deeper conversation about it. Not necessarily like, why are you doing this? You just do it for the money, but have that conversation where looking at this ingredient list, I was comparing it to this other food that's on the market. This food is, maybe it's a cost thing, and this is easier for me to feed. My cat actually likes this food better. So can you explain the difference between these foods? What that's going to do is it's going to help your veterinarian connect deeper with you, or that veterinarian realize, I don't know how to explain that. And then hopefully what happens then is they go, I need to learn more about that. And they start doing the deep dive that all of us have done and realize that there's a better way to feed our cats. So I think that's really important. Still try to have that conversation. If your veterinarian is not open to even having a conversation about it, if you're able to, find another vet. I know not everyone has that option, but that's the biggest thing. The FDA is not regulating these prescription diets. They're not being... There was actually, I think it might have been a year ago or so, that they actually came under heat from, I think, the regulatory industries, because it's being marketed as a prescription food. And you have to be very careful talking about prescription foods and using food to treat certain health conditions. So obviously nothing really came of that, because they're still available, unfortunately. But that is something most people, and also most veterinarians, don't truly actually understand the prescription diet. And that it's actually a marketing ploy.
Yeah, and you can actually go to the trademark database. It's available to anyone online, and you can look up the term prescription diet, and you can see who owns that term, and then that is probably why they got away with it, because they've trademarked the term so they can use it, right?
I think it's a really important point, though, that you made, and I just want to kind of hammer it home, because I feel like there's so much, especially we cat parents, should be doing to foster better relationships with our veterinarians, regardless of whether they're more conventional, more integrative, holistic, whatever it may be. They are there to care for our pets. And I think it's a really good point to reiterate, is that when we recognize that we're not seeing eye to eye, maybe on diet specifically, it's not that our vet is making a buck off of it. That's not what's motivating them to say, hey, you need this kidney diet. It's that they were trained by certain
pet food companies.
Right.
Pet food
That
companies.
was their nutrition course. So I
Right.
think it's really important to remember that, like you said, this is a great opportunity to have a conversation, to look at some of these ingredient lists and ask the questions.
Yes,
And
hope,
go from there.
and hope, yes, all of the information that is being shared about cat, because we're talking cat specific, and we're looking at the ingredients in the cat foods. But yes, all that information also applies to dogs and dog parents, and you can go and read those ingredients as well. And it's the same concept here.
Dr. Lori Kosher in the house as well. And yes, you guys, for anyone who's working right now, Emily, I see your comment. This will stay live, or not live. This will stay on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel as well, so you can watch anytime.
And share.
Real quickly, can I ask you to kind of explain to all of us? So there are these prescription diets that we only get from our veterinarians. And then there is this vast amount of other diets that you see, on the shelves. And it could be anything from,
Urinary,
right? All of these things, but they're more veterinary formulas, or are
hairball formulas,
right? Or indoor cat formulas, or weight management, or healthy coat, or there's tons of stuff. And I think, is there a way to kind of explain what the difference is between prescription diets and those that we can just pick up?
Yeah, they're going to be very similar, honestly. Like, that's the thing. And once again, once we start going through the ingredient list, people are going to realize like it's so similar. And as I mentioned too at the beginning, using food and manipulating food and changing the ingredients we use can be very powerful. Like using food therapy principles, I use that all the time for my patients, where we can introduce different types of food that support digestion better, or we can use things that are going to be cooler energetically. Now, that is not going to be the principles behind these pet foods that you're buying off of the shelf. But what they've done, and this is also where like breed specific foods also, I will never forget having Finn as a puppy, German Shepherd puppy, he was a puppy during vet school. I bought him the German Shepherd food, and I thought I was doing the best for him. I was like, he's a German Shepherd. It's made for German Shepherds. And, I listened to that spiel about it. And then I realized that, oh, it's not. It's like the same thing when you actually read the ingredient list. And so when we look at, now, if your cat does really well on a specific formula and it's labeled for weight loss, then keep them on that. I'm not saying that you necessarily I would take a look at the ingredient list and make sure we're getting the moisture content up. But if your pet's doing really well, they feel really good, they're at a good body condition score, they don't have GI upset, and that's working for your budget and it's working for your cat, a lot of times we can keep them on that food. Now, if it's relating to something where the ingredients list, you're not liking that and you want to transition them, then I recommend doing that slowly over 2 weeks. But the joint health, here's the thing. What they did with those foods that are labeled for joint health is they did a very limited feeding trial for some of them, not for all of them. And they added additional omega-3 essential fatty acids. They added in a little bit of like glucosamine. So all the things that you can add in as an additional supplement to fill the gaps for whatever health condition your cat has, I would rather you be using whole real food sources or natural supplements that have been vetted by, it's a good company, that they're sourcing appropriately. It doesn't have heavy metal contamination or other ingredients in it. And you're going to get better results rather than using, say, like a kibble that's been cooked and blasted at high heat temperatures and has formed all these other byproducts like advanced glycation end products and chemicals that are actually going to increase inflammation. And even those omega-3s, who knows what's left over at the end. So keep that in mind when you're looking at these foods and going, okay, well, I know about joint health. I know I need to add these things in. Maybe for our kitties, they're getting a sardine like 2 times a week. And that's a whole food source of omega-3 essential fatty acids. And it's going to provide those extra nutrients to support joint health and reduce inflammation naturally. So that's how I look at food. What you're seeing in the stores is a marketing. It's all about marketing and grabbing you. You feel like you need that. That's why you're going to buy that product label. They've got millions of dollars in marketing. They know how to attract people. And unfortunately, they know we want the best for our pets and they play to that.
Yeah.
It's remarkable. I want to dive in. I'm so excited to get your feedback on these ingredients. I just want to explain. I think we're going to have a little bit of time here at the end to answer a couple of your questions, so you can start dropping those. What we're going to be looking at really quickly is basically 3 of the big issues. We're looking at urinary diets, kidney diets and gastrointestinal diets. And what you're about to see will be a dry food prescription diet, a wet food prescription diet, and then from the same brand, one of their standard adult diets. So
we can just do the comparison,
right.
and we can have the wonderful Dr. Katie go through and kind of explain them. Because for me personally, when I talk to people and they're a little worried about the prescription diet, it's, I'm like, I would never want any of my cats on these diets long-term, right?
Yes.
Even if it helps in the short term, just because if you understand the ingredient list, using it long-term, we've just heard too many horror stories of, cats that were on a urinary food and the vet said they had to be on it for life. So they were on it and the urinary was fine, but all of a sudden they got kidney disease and hyperthyroidism and all kinds of other things, diabetes, and they had to be put down. So
here's the thing, actually, I want to touch on that really quick before we dive into the ingredient list, because you mentioned something really important about the long-term feeding of these diets. So anytime, and this is where you'll hear this from your veterinarian, where it's undergone an AFCO feeding trial. And I would ask them, what is involved in an AFCO feeding trial? It's a question you can directly ask your veterinarian, and they should hopefully be able to answer that. What it entails is taking 10 animals, feeding that food through 6 months. Only 8 have to pass. They can repeat it as many times as possible. They're measuring, did they lose a significant amount of weight? They're measuring, did their stool fecal score stay relatively normal? And they're also checking just basic blood parameters. 6 months is over, that food is good for life. We have no idea long-term vitamin mineral deficiencies or issues. That is so important. And it's one of those things where doing like hair tissue tests and analyzing and doing different types of diagnostics, I see pets that are deficient in vitamins and minerals. And if they're stressed out, we know that a lot of times that's going to play a part too. So keep that in mind. We are not testing the level of inflammation in the body. We're not checking CRP. We're not checking other factors. We aren't testing this through the life of the pet. So all those AFCO feeding trials are for 6 months, and 8 pets have to pass. And if all 10 fail, they'll just repeat it with other pets and get them through it. And they can repeat as many times. So
Wow.
that is very, very important to keep in the back of your mind when we're talking about this and these prescription foods. And, Jay and Adrian, you're 100% right. We see side effects from these prescription diets long-term, like kidney diets, like low protein for an obligate carnivore. It's not going to end well.
No.
And so this is where we have to, and I don't even know why that's on the market, and we'll go through it too, because there's no studies to show that limiting protein actually helps our cats. It actually harms them in the long term. So we'll go through it though.
I did not know that. That is very interesting. I always learn something new from you every time we do this, and I am so excited. But I did not know that it's only 6 months and only 10 cats, right? That they have to. That's, and then it's called science. Okay, let's go ahead.
It's AFCO approved.
Those trials obviously don't test for inflammation in the body. And then you asked, you said, or CRP. What is
CRP? So it's an inflammatory marker. So we tend to measure that, people will have that measured in their body, and it can show you how much inflammation you have. So some diagnostics on blood work for your pets will have that. And there's ones like cancer blood panels that will include CRP. So you can actually see if the treatment you're using is reducing inflammation in the body. That is not a part of this. This is looking at, your basic, are they anemic? They're not going to probably be anemic unless something's serious. It'll show up if something is really deficient, something bad is going to happen in 6 months, and then who knows what they'll do with that food. But there's a lot of tricks to get these foods through these trials. And keep in mind too, when you look at these ingredient lists and when you're looking at the back of the bag, it'll say, was it based on an AFCO feeding trial, or was it based was it formulated according to AFCO standards? So that means that food did not go through feeding trials. It didn't go through digestibility studies. A lot of these foods haven't gone through digestibility studies. What that means is how well is that food absorbed in the body and utilized for the vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. So that's a whole nother thing. And that was a big problem with a couple of years back with the heart issues with the grain-free diets and the DCM. And, pet foods are coming out on the market because of trends on the human side, and they're, marketing once again, and they haven't showcased the long-term efficacy and safety of these foods. And then we end up down the road with health issues that hopefully can be reversed, but sometimes they can't. So that is very important to know. And also just ask your vet, because if they don't know that information, hopefully it triggers them. That's how I went down this path. I had people asking me these questions and I was like, I need to learn more. And I was like, there's something not right with what I'm doing. And I started learning more. And then I woke up and I realized there was a much better way of doing things. So that can hopefully help your veterinarian if they just don't know and they haven't realized it yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And
That's
I
really
would
good.
personally argue the digestibility of any of these ingredients we're about to. We're about
Yeah,
to.
Well,
So guys, this is our very first time at showing slides on a live.
with
And
super
so-
fancies, and I hope it works.
yeah, so we hope it works. Bear with us if it doesn't, because we're not technically amazing. So let's see.
So let's start with, this is going to be
There we go.
Right. All right. It's dry food.
All right,
Okay.
Dr. Katie, take it away.
Okay, so when we're looking at urinary foods, especially for cats, usually it's because I saw it in the comments, like some cats have had a urinary tract obstruction. We're dealing with like struvite crystals. And the question I always ask, for one, is there an infection? Have we done a urine, like an actual urinalysis, and have we done a culture to identify if there's an infection? And then the question also is why are we forming crystals? What type of crystals? What's the pH of the urine? But then it's time to go to the root issue. And that's, what type of food are you feeding? Is this cat on a dry food diet? Now, this is a prescription dry food diet. And when I look at it, for one, moisture is so important for our cats. They are not good at drinking water already. They're prone to getting chronic dehydration, which can lead to kidney disease. We know that urinary crystals are more likely to form when that urine is really concentrated and they're not urinating frequently enough. That alone can fix your cat's urinary crystals. Moisture. So the fact that we created a dry food prescription urinary diet, right away, exit, gone. Like if your cat is on a dry food diet and they have a urinary problem, you need to work on transitioning them to, I don't even care if you put them on Friskies. Honestly, like it will be better than feeding a dry food diet over time, or at least adding water to this. But when you look at this ingredient list, so keep in mind these ingredient lists are going to be labeled with that first ingredient is going to be the higher, the biggest concentration in there, right? So that's going to be at the, what am I trying to say? The highest concentration. So
Right.
Chicken byproduct meal is technically making up the majority of that food, right? Technically.
Well, technically, right?
Yeah,
Because
technically. So let me go into ingredient splitting. So
Yeah.
then what we look at is, then we have brewer's rice, then we have corn gluten meal, chicken fat, wheat gluten, natural flavors, wheat. When we hit salt, everything past that is typically your synthetic vitamins, minerals, makes up less than 5% of the food. So salt is a divider. And so this is also where there's no like real healthy superfoods in this food anyways. But this is where also I look after salt, because I want to see, is the company throwing in things like blueberries, cranberries? And if they're doing that after salt, it's another marketing ploy. And I don't like it when I see that. So that's a salt divider rule. But go back. What are our cats? They're obligate carnivores. They need meat. Where's the meat? Chicken byproduct meal is not meat. It is a cheap source of ingredients that they are using. And that's also why they're putting brewer's rice, corn gluten meal. They're using corn gluten meal because there have been studies that have showed a lot of times what we're doing is we want to reduce the urine pH. It's too high. That's why we have struvite crystals form. Well, like I said, they're usually dried out and they need more moisture. They're getting dehydrated. Corn gluten meal works just as well as saying using chicken. So why would they use corn gluten meal or corn? Because it's cheap. That's right. So that's why they're using these ingredients. They're cheaper. They know that cats will sometimes eat this. But if you've ever had a cat on a prescription dry food diet, I think it's like eating cardboard, because the majority of them, it's not palatable and they don't want to eat it. So when I look at this list, I'm like, I don't like the ingredients, for one, because they're poor quality ingredients. There's no biologically appropriate protein source for these cats. And we're using things like wheat, corn gluten meal there can be aflatoxins and molds and things like that in these foods. And we're using synthetic vitamins and minerals for everything to replace what's going on. Now, DL-methionine down the list, like about halfway down, just in front of taurine, is used to help with the urine pH. It can also be added into these foods for really high carb diets to increase the protein also. So when I look at this, for one, I am not a fan of dry food diets. In general, for cats, they are not a species appropriate food. They don't tend to do well for them. And we're also keeping your cat in the vicious cycle of not fixing the root cause for why your cat had a urinary problem in the first place. So let's or if you have anything to add based on that dry food, it's just
I think that's a great. So what we're doing is we're going with the same brand on each health issue, right? So let's go and say, okay, this brand
no
dry food. Let's not do this. Let's go and see about their wet food. So they also have a prescription wet food.
Well, and time out for a second. I think, a lot of times people think, well, chicken byproduct, that's just like, oh, what we shave off and don't want to eat ourselves. I think people need to understand just how disgusting a byproduct is and what it is.
Well, let's take a step back. So byproducts aren't bad.
Right.
So when actually go back to that last slide for the dry food, because it's on so you'll see chicken byproduct meal. So byproducts are like the organs. Right. When I'm using, so say I'm formulating a diet, I'm going to be using things like liver and kidney, and I'm going to be using organ meats. Those are technically the byproducts. So they can actually be very nutritious. But when we see meal, so whether it's chicken meal, whether it's chicken byproduct meal always indicates a rendered product. Mm-hmm. So rendering, if you don't know what rendering is, well, just make sure you're not looking it up while you're eating. It is one of the most grossest things out there. And what they do is they pretty much take all the leftovers from the human side. So all the feed grade, not human grade, like dead animals, diseased animals, euthanized animals, roadkill. So think about your restaurants, what happens to the leftovers, that grease, what happens to your supermarket, leftover foods, expired products. They don't remove the packaging. They don't remove the plastics. They don't remove the ear tags from the cows that are deceased. It all goes into a vat. Yes. And what happens is it's cooked up into like this soup of grossness, and then it's dried out and it's formed into a meal powder that is sold to the majority of the pet food companies everywhere. So, we see that they're using the same type of meal. It is cheap. It also, we know that it creates more inflammation in the body because of the way it's processed. And also we see like BPA and phthalates. It's been measured because of all this other stuff that's thrown into that vat with the food. Most veterinarians have no idea what rendering is. And I didn't either. And that's important for the meal. So so byproducts aren't bad. The problem is that when we see a rendered product, that's where we know this is a cheaper, lower quality. It's a feed grade. So there's human grade, there's feed grade. Feed grade is everything that is not good enough to go onto the human side. It can be cancerous, like cuts off of the meat that goes into your pet food. That can be, that's why we've had pentobarbital recalls in pet food. Euthanized animals, I hate saying this, they have been tracked to go into the pet food industry. Yep. So keep in mind, we think about all the livestock, all the animals, all the waste products, they have to go somewhere. They found a place to put them. They're putting it in your pet food. Yep.
Absolutely. In fact, my dad used to work in a rendering plant, and he had only lasted about 2 or 3 weeks because and the stories are disgusting. And he was the one in the factory putting these dead things through the processor, and the tarps would go through and the scissors would go through. And he's like, it's millions of dollars if you shut it down. So you just have to keep it going. But he smelled so bad. I literally moved out in with one of my friends, because I was like, I cannot stand the smell in the house. And that's after he changed clothes before he came in the house. Like it's disgusting.
Well, and to your point earlier as well, I mean, when you do start realizing what goes into these pet foods, realizing that it is taking our human waste in a way and things that we're trying to figure out, then you better understand the marketing aspect a little bit.
Not fit for human consumption. Okay, so let's go to the wet food. Let's say, okay, the cat needs to be on a wet food. Let's get them from this dry food over to this urinary RX wet food.
Okay, so this will be better than the dry food. So if you had to pick one, this would still be 100 times better than feeding the prescription dry food for a urinary issue. But when I go through this, once again, we start at the beginning, we work our way through, and I'm not seeing, so yes, there's chicken. So at least we have chicken in there. It's further down the list. But there's a lot of liver that's used in this too. We don't want to use a ton of liver in these foods. It's high vitamin A. But once again, it's cheaper. And so when I'm going through this though, also we have wheat flour, wheat gluten, and then I keep going, and right in the middle there, a couple rows down, I see carrageenan. Carrageenan is a gelling agent. So it's it's emulsifier, it gels. So you'll find it hopefully you don't, but this is why it's important to read ingredient lists. It'll be found mainly in wet foods, so dog and cat wet foods. I'm always looking for this because it's a known GI irritant. What research companies will do if they want to stimulate inflammation in the body, they'll actually inject carrageenan into like the GI lining to make it inflamed. So why the heck are we using it in our pet's food? And this is, you may notice this, there's been a trend to remove that out of human products. So like your coconut milk, yogurts and things like, and it's because it creates irritation in the gut. And so whenever I see this, I'm like, no, don't use it, because especially a lot of these cats, they might be vomiting or have sensitive GI tracts. And we know that the gut health is directly connected to the level of inflammation in the body and also to the urinary system. And if we're setting up this inflammation and chronic inflammatory state in the body, we're probably going to be contributing to a urinary problem too. And also stress levels, which is very important on the urinary side. So once again, looking, keep going. We're after salt. All of that is going to be your synthetic vitamins and minerals. I don't know if this one has the metadione. I don't think it does. So we'll get to that. But again, once again, you see the DL-methionine for the urinary stuff. So, better than dry. But once again, going through that ingredient list, we can do much better than this for your cats. So let's go to the non-urinary wet food.
There we go.
So, God, are you sure that's a different one? Just joking. Because the thing is when I look at this, who here agrees it looks so similar to what we just looked at? Like I look at it, I'm like, wow, because it's the same company, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. So looking at just like so why the heck are you paying probably like 10 times more for your prescription wet food is my question. Once again, we've got that beautiful carrageenan and I'm being sarcastic there. I do not recommend that. There's not the DL-methionine. That's what's missing from this, right? But here's the thing. If you're feeding a moisture-rich, species-appropriate cat food, I promise you that most likely you're not going to have urinary tract issues, especially if you're making sure that the stress levels are low, that we're focusing on those other foundations of health, and that we are supporting good gut health. And so this is where you could use this, and you could just make sure your cat's getting a lot of water, and you're going to save money in the long run. There's better options we'll talk about too, but I think this is so important for like pet parents to see that it's really not that much different. And so marketing and essentially, I bet you if you compared these two, if you brought this ingredient list to your veterinarian and asked about it and said, I wasn't sure if this is a urinary food, just ask them, compare this to the other one we just showed and have that conversation and see what they have to say. And I think that's really important. And we kind of start exposing these bigger companies that are taking us for our money.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's, I would challenge anyone here to do just that with your veterinarian. Like if your cat has been put on a prescription diet of some sort, read the ingredients first, just read the ingredients, see what makes sense. Does it resonate with you? And then take it to your vet and ask them the questions. because
Yeah.
that's so
And
important.
the one thing too I want to say, like, so the ingredient lists aren't like the end all be all, right? We have our guaranteed analysis also. There's the protein concentrations, fat concentrations, carbohydrate concentrations. So there's going to be other factors, but I think like just becoming a bit more familiar with what's going into the pet foods and where it's coming from can empower you with a lot of tools and knowledge to really kind of get you started. So like this, like by itself, wouldn't be like it that I'd be looking at, but I think it's a great place for pet parents to start.
Absolutely.
I agree. Do you want to, is it even appropriate to ask? I know people are wondering, when it comes to especially urinary tract issues and reoccurring UTIs, is there, and that is part of the kind of plays into the fear of, oh, I've got to have my cat on a prescription food. What, or can you share what you think a good alternative diet would be? You kind of touched on it earlier about adding in moisture and that sort of thing. Is that,
and supplementations, right?
Yeah.
So like, so like a moisture rich diet, you said is so important for cats with UTIs or urinary issues in general. They're not always infections. Sometimes it's just bladder inflammation, and which is usually resulting from stress or diet stress in some form, right? But what type of supplementation would you add, say, for struvite crystals, or if they have oxalate crystals, like what would you do as a pet parent, or what would you advise pet parents to do in order to get their cats on a better quality diet, but still address the issue?
Yeah, for urinary, hands down, moisture is the biggest thing. So, I mean, even if you're feeding like this non-RX wet food, the problem that we have too is like ash content. So it's going to be like your magnesium, your ammonium, your phosphates. Those are what form like the crystals that form like potentially the bladder stones too. So some of these foods are really rich in ash content. So like the mineral levels. The way to calculate that out is you're going to combine your water content, your carbs, your fats, your proteins, subtract that from 100, that gives you your carb content. And then typically like ash content, if it's not listed on there, is going to be around 7 to 8%. We want to keep that a little bit lower for our urinary cat issues. So I'd definitely be looking at that and figuring that out if it's not listed, using the wet food diet, working on stress levels. So if your cat is really stressy, if they're reactive, they're noise sensitive, if you know that there's a lot of stress in the household with yourself or your family, kids, things like that, and your cat is always hiding or displaying some of these signs of stress, we have to address stress. There's this entire complex of stress cystitis that is based off of a stress response. And if we're not treating that, I don't care what food you're feeding, it will come back. And so I think using things like, it's important to talk to your veterinarian, but if cats can go on it, using things like CBD to help calm them, you can use herb gardens. We've talked a lot about that. We talked about that last weekend with Julianne, using herb gardens that integrate in like lavender and valerian that you can put down on a towel in a quiet room, and they can self-select for those types of herbs. We can also use natural anti-inflammatory herbs too. We know this is an inflammatory disease. And so we can use things like linden flower. We can use, so valerian's also really good. Comfrey is really good natural anti-inflammatory herb. So that's a great way to introduce some of these natural herbs and supplements into a cat's life without it being stressful and you like finding them and squirting stuff in their mouth or adding it to their food if they're already picky. Biggest thing too with these urinary diets is that they stay on it too long. It's usually 4 struvite crystals where the urine pH is too high. So what can happen is it drops the urine pH too low over time, and we get calcium oxalate stones. Those stones cannot be dissolved through diet alone. They have to be surgically removed. So that's another big thing to be aware of. Surgery is not cheap. The stress of that, your cat's already probably having some stress component. That's why we're in this state. So looking at the wet food diets, raw food diets are great. So using good companies that have been around for a while, that are doing the studies, that don't have the recalls behind them, that are a balanced diet. One of the ones I use all the time is Darwin's, and they're AFCO, they follow AFCO guidelines. So you don't have to add anything into that food. So it also removes you feeling like there's potentially going to be an issue long term, because I know that's a big fear for a lot of people here. But going to what is the most species appropriate diet for my cat, if we can get them onto raw food diets, that will help. Otherwise, like freeze dried, doing lightly cooked foods, using real food ingredients. If we can get away from using a lot of these synthetic vitamins and minerals that we know aren't as well absorbed in the body as using the whole food sources, it can make a big difference. So I would say moisture, reducing stress, and then try to limit how much like ingredients are being used in the food, which comes down to reading the ingredient lists and also doing the research on the companies to see, have there been recalls, who owns them, where are they sourcing, is there traceability of the proteins that they're using. Those are all like great things to look at that should be available on their website. If they're not, you can ask those questions when you call them. If they refuse to answer them, walk away.
Yes.
Go away and just walk away. So,
I agree.
True.
I agree. Okay, so let's move on to kidney diets, because
Kidney.
this is one of the leading causes of unfortunately death in our kitties, and everybody is scared when it's. I mean, people come to us every day. My cat was just diagnosed with kidney disease. What can I do? What can I do? And they're being put on. Many of them are being put on these kidney.
This
diets.
is one of the most popular ones. And this,
Yep.
again, is a dry food.
Yep. So once again, dry food, just any dry food, whether we're talking about prescription diets or not, if you can get your cat off dry food, I would like, once again, the worst canned wet food will be better than a dry food diet in the short term. And then you can always transition over to better quality if you can. But especially for kidney disease, these cats are dehydrated. And so if we're feeding a diet, dry food diets have like 10% moisture, whereas your fresh food diets, your raw food diets are typically going to be at least 70%. So that gives you an idea of how dry these dry food diets are. And when I look at this, there's this thing, for some reason, we feed limited protein diets to kidney cats, because why would we stress the kidneys, right? We don't want to give them more protein. However, cats, there's numerous studies that show that cats do really poorly when they're put on a low protein diet, even with kidney disease, unless your cat is in like the last stage of kidney disease. So we have 4 stages of kidney disease. So grade 1, 2, 3, 4. Typically, unless your cat's been really sick, if we're finding elevated BUN and creatinine on blood work, like routine blood work is where a lot of times this is found. And your vet goes, oh my gosh, they're in like stage 1 kidney disease. What we need to do is we need to put them on this like kidney diet, and then they're on that for the rest of their life, and we just monitor it. And then, there's not much we can do. We can use phosphate binders and sub-Q fluids when that time comes. And sometimes we use potassium supplements. And it's the worst way to treat kidney disease, because we're now limiting protein. We're making them go into a protein deficient state where now they're starting to use and break down their muscle. And that's actually putting more pressure on their kidneys. So looking at this dry food diet looks fantastic, right? Brown rice is the first ingredient. And then we have corn gluten meal. Then we at least have some chicken. But here's the thing. Whenever you see meat, so just like chicken, beef, and a dry food diet, that is being like cooked down. So that is still containing all the moisture in it. So when we actually cook down this dry food and cook the heck out of it through the extrusion process, there's that chicken will be much further down the list. It'll probably actually be right before salt. Where's salt? Potassium citrate. Oh, so they're using, so it'll be right before all of those artificial synthetic vitamins and minerals. It is not going to be number 3. And then we have pork fat, whole grain, wheat. Great. I don't know a cat who eats like wheat or chooses, I guess sometimes they'll eat bread, right? But that's not their normal diet. So cracked pearl barley, wheat, gluten. We know all of those ingredients right there are also heavily sprayed by glyphosate or Roundup. We know glyphosate affects your cats and your dog's microbiome. It kills the good bacteria. Why the heck would we be doing that when we're already having a body work over time? So pea protein, super, super cheap protein. That is also one of the most highly sprayed with Roundup. So if we were to check these cats' levels of what is their level of glyphosate in the body through like a urine test, I guarantee you that cat would be super high in glyphosate, which is creating more inflammation, is creating inflammation in the gut. It's disrupting that microbiome, which is essential for optimal health. So looking at that by itself is not good. Now, I want you to also look, because this food has it. So if you keep going down, it's probably like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows up. There's a vitamin D3 supplement, and then there's menadione sodium bisulfate complex. So this is banned by the FDA to be used on the human side. It's been banned for years. So it is a synthetic source of vitamin K. Vitamin K is important. It helps with like clotting and things like that. Now, the problem is that it's only been approved by the FDA for poultry feed. It has never been tested for our dogs and cats. It is a known carcinogen on the human side. So why the heck are we using that? Do you know what good natural sources for vitamin K are? Alfalfa and kelp. But why aren't we using it? Because it costs too much. So that's when I see that, I just, there's a lot of strikes on this food. We've got natural flavors. Like, why do we need to add natural flavors? It's because it tastes like cardboard. So this diet right here is one of the ones that is most commonly refused by cats. They don't want to eat it. It doesn't taste good. Well, no, duh, because it's really low in protein, right?
Right.
And cats want protein. That is what they need for their bodies to survive and hopefully to thrive. So once again, dry food, no. Ingredients, not good quality food. When we start actually going through this list and looking at why are we recommending this? It's not helping cats. And I can tell you right now from personal experience through the years, I do not use these prescription diets, and my patients do really well. And sometimes there's a transition period, but there's a lot. I love treating kidney disease because we can reverse kidney disease with real food, using supplements. These cats need additional omega-3 essential fatty acids, making sure we're using fish oil or your green lip mussel. That will help naturally reduce inflammation in those kidneys. So that's once again where we can get these cats onto better food diets, and then we can supplement to fill in the gaps where their body is working overtime. But I would stay away from this food if you can. And definitely it's not suitable for life. There's actually studies that show if cats are on these foods for long term, the kidney disease worsens. And also we start seeing electrolyte issues and sodium levels drop, potassium levels drop, because it's not a species appropriate diet.
And isn't that sad? Because this is also one of the most expensive foods on the market.
No.
And again, this is the dry food. So let's look at the wet food. Same brand for a prescription kidney diet. Yes.
Yeah. And so when I look at this one, I'm like, well, at least we have chicken, right? So there's a bonus. We're got to look for the silver lining somewhere, right? Not all doom and gloom. So at least we have chicken. Got brewer's rice again. So it's a good, cheap source. Tuna. So tuna, when I look at this, I'm like, one, they're probably putting it in there because of a lot of cats will eat fish, for the flavoring. Problem is, where did they source this tuna? It tends to be really high in mercury, and heavy metals, and not ideal. I do not recommend cats be on fish diets every single day. It can be something where you rotate it in every now and then, but I try to stay away from that just because it's not an ideal food for them to have all the time. Right. Then we also have dried whey. So cats, are we going to be creating GI upset now with this product? Soybean oil, once again, we're adding in glyphosate. We have, I believe, did they leave carrageenan out in this one? So they didn't use carrageenan. So guar gum is the emulsifier, the gelling agent that's used in this, and that's fine. I would want to see that. But once again, you see here that menadione sodium bisulfate complex. So I look at this, and the sad part is that vitamin K is really high in muscle meat. You don't actually need to add it in. If you ever formulated a cat diet using real foods, using organs, using things like kelp and, natural sources of vitamins and minerals, you don't have to add in vitamin K because your whole foods actually naturally have it. So it's just another thing, once again, better than dry, but we can do much better. I would say, honestly, that non-prescription wet food we showed previously is probably better than this, honestly.
From the same brand that makes this kidney prescription diets, here is their non-prescription wet food, just for regular adults.
Yeah, that's going to cost a lot less.
Yeah, and I mean, it's essentially the same. So here's another thing too with ingredients. So you'll see and this is, I recommend this is why it's so important to read ingredient lists and get familiar with what these terms mean. But you see that meat byproducts, I have no idea what meat that is.
No.
That can be anything.
Yep.
That could be wild turkey run over on the road. It could be, who
Could be
knows,
raccoon.
like bird. Like, I don't know. I have no idea. And so, especially for pets that have food sensitivities, like this is where it gets really hard because you have no idea what protein sources are in this. And also so we have soy flour, fish, no idea. Liver, what type of liver? For one, like, how are we actually formulating this too, is my question, because chicken liver, beef liver are going to have very different nutritional concentrations.
Right.
So what they're doing, I can tell you what they're doing is that they're adding all the things in to make sure that all these different sources of liver, they're not going to have hopefully a nutritional deficiency, but they're okay having an excess of certain things. So this definitely is something artificial and natural flavors. Added color. There you go. I was going to say, where are the added colors? So that's another thing. So your added colors, we know that artificial colors are no good. There are numerous studies on the human side. They create inflammation, they create behavior problems. So no good. Once again, metadione sodium bisulfate complex. So these are the things that I look at. We can't always get away from synthetic vitamins and minerals, especially if we are using processed foods sometimes, but you can look for those things that I keep referring back to and find brands that don't have them. They do exist. It takes a little bit longer to go through them. And I've had to do this with my own pets. Like, I'll sit in the store and I will go through ingredient lists, because remember, they can change too. The brands can change. So keep that in mind. And always, anytime, I wouldn't just rely on it being the same. I always look at ingredient lists every time I'm shopping for my own pets, and even for patients if we're recommending some type of process rather than like a raw food diet or a homemade diet.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to kidney disease, let's talk a little bit about, because I know that there's still the myth that goes around that older cats need less protein. So they'll have senior diets even on the at the pet stores. You'll see, for senior cats, and they're also very low in protein. And we know that that's a myth. We know that cats are obligate carnivores, which means they need animal protein, not soy protein or pea protein. They need animal meat in their diet. But for older cats, then would we, I think the quality of the protein is important. I mean, I think it's important for every cat, but I think the quality of the protein is important especially for older cats dealing with kidney disease. But what are some suggestions that you have for cats, for the cat parents out there that are dealing with kidney disease?
Yeah. So biggest thing, to make sure your veterinarian is checking phosphorus levels, because phosphorus can go too high. And that's what we call a poor prognostic indicator. When levels are really high, it can be harder to fix that. And that's also when we would use something like a phosphate binder. And then we also we can look at certain diets that tend to be lower in phosphorus also. So that's a bigger one than protein. We want the protein levels to be high enough where that cat is not going into a protein deficient state. So unless your cat is over 65 to 80 BUN, and also the creatinine's over 2.5, those are the values for like the US side, we shouldn't be using protein deficient foods. This is also where using species appropriate, biologically available protein. So eggs are really, really helpful. Those are really, really well absorbed into the body. Dairy products, lean meats. So those are essential. And the moisture content is also essential. The other thing is that we find the kidneys aren't working as well. The urine tends to be more diluted. And also things like B vitamins can be flushed out of the kidneys. So a lot of times we're adding in additional sources of some of these nutrients to compensate. Now you can get vitamin B12 levels checked from your vet just to see with where your cat is. They tend to be pretty safe though, if you're just adding them a couple times a week, just to make sure that your cat's staying topped up, because those B vitamins are essential for the immune system and overall health. So those are a couple options. And then there's also a lot of kidney tonics. So herbs that we can use that support kidney health, that also drive more blood flow to the kidney. So when we think about kidney disease, what happens is the nephrons are the functional unit of the kidney. That's what's concentrating. It's also helping keep the things in the body that should stay in, and get rid of toxins that shouldn't stay in the body. And what we found, and this is why using herbs and Chinese herbs can actually reverse kidney disease, where we're essentially taught like it's just a game over. You just watch your cat get worse and progress through these different stages. When we use herbs that increase blood flow to the kidney, so things like Rehmannia, what we find is that when we recheck blood work, then what happens is those values go down. And that can be the only thing that you change as long as we're using like a high moisture food. And essentially, it's like waking those nephrons back up and getting them functioning again and feeling better. And so that's really, really, there's different types of tonics out there that you can use. RX Vitamins has some great renal support supplements that you could use that utilizes a lot of different nutraceuticals that have like melatonin and other herbs in them. And then also Animal Essentials has some good supplements too. Those are a couple brands that you can go to that I like and trust and tend to be pretty, like, especially Animal Essentials, the glycerin tinctures are really good to add in. But I'd be looking at, once again, your omega-3 essential fatty acids help reduce inflammation. Your gut support is key. So using things like, if you're looking at your cat, are they prone to GI upset? Also, a lot of these cats are. Adding in probiotics, digestive enzymes, helping to calm the stress response and inflammation down naturally alongside the diet. Because if we just do diet alone, yes, it's very, very powerful and important, but we're missing all those other factors that we can use to heal them.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
brilliant.
Okay.
Right, talking about GI upset, the last one that we've got here today is gastrointestinal IBD, IBS diets. And this is going to be what I think is fascinating. I feel like we're just going over and over again, but these are some really scary conditions that our cats have. And I feel like what we can clearly see is just how similar these foods really are. And maybe they're tweaking one or two supplements in there.
But for even from brand to brand, and I do want to say that I do know for a fact that all three of these brands, and we're talking about the top three brands, are what we're not listing names for legality's sakes, but
these are not ambiguous.
But these
like
are
digging a back shelf somewhere. These
are
them.
Are the most recommended out there for RX prescription diets. Yeah.
Yeah. So IBD, we need to be supporting gut health. Like, this is inflammatory bowel disease. These are the cats that have chronic GI upset, vomiting, diarrhea, don't feel good. Usually there is a big stress component to this too. So we really want to be using good foods that are anti-inflammatory, especially to that gut health, supporting the microbiome. When I talk about microbiome, good bacteria should be outweighing the bad bacteria. That's a huge part of overall health that's commonly overlooked. And that's where these foods can really mess up the core of health. And this is doing that. Soy protein isolate, poultry byproduct meal, corn gluten meal, once again, soy flakes. And what they're trying to do with this is to limit the protein sources, I would say. But when we're looking, and there's not a lot of ingredients other than the rest of that being your vitamins and minerals. But I look at that and I'm like, well, for once again, going back to glyphosate, I go back to that a lot because it's playing a huge part in disrupting the microbiome and creating a lot of chronic health diseases. There's a lot of studies on how that affects us. It affects our pets. And we have to be aware of that because especially with inflammatory bowel disease, like cleaning up diarrhea, having those issues, like watching your cat not feel good, it's really stressful for us. And if we're feeding foods that actually aren't allowing that gut lining to heal, we're going to have a problem. And so I can see what they're trying to add dried colostrum. This is a dry food diet. So remember, it's going to go through the extrusion process, which is cooking at really high heat temperatures. So do you really think that the immunoglobulins, those beneficial properties of colostrum, are actually going to survive that process? Probably not. That's like companies that will put like probiotics into their food. Like, there's no way that like is alive at the end of that high heat cooking process. So once again, dry food, no. We can do much better. Once again, there's the menadione sodium bisulfate. So it's just one of those things where, how do we better support these cats' guts? There's a lot better ways to do this, and this food is not it.
Yeah.
Nope.
What is soy protein isolate? Can you explain that? Do you know?
So your soy protein isolate is going to be, so I'm trying to think of like the best way to explain it.
Oh, no.
I'd have to, let me look up the definition of that. So I'm not gonna, let me see.
Hold
But-
on, and I'm trying to get rid of this little fella that's.
We've got a creeper.
We got a
We
creeper.
got a creeper. We got a troll.
Well, he's just trying to befriend everyone here.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
Mm.
It's okay. We can all be friends, right? To a certain extent. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. I'm just interested because
Yes. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I explained it properly. So it's essentially it's extracted out from your soybeans. So when I talk about like glyphosate, your soybeans are going to be heavily sprayed with glyphosate, and your pea proteins are sprayed at the end of harvest. So this is where people will be like non-GMO versus organic, and your non-GMO doesn't mean that they're not sprayed with these chemicals too. So soy protein is a cheaper form of protein from soy. Now, here's the thing. I saw there's a couple people here with thyroid issues, like their cats have hyperthyroidism. Soy is a known endocrine disruptor. And so if you have a cat with hyperthyroid, you have a dog with hypothyroid, I mean, just in general, we shouldn't be using this as the main protein source for our pets or for ourselves because of those problems that it can cause in the body. So once again, not a good protein source that's going to optimize health in the body. Looking at this food, looking like dried colostrum. Okay, whoop-de-doo. Like I can use things. We can use GI support outside of the actual diet to further and better the microbiome. So I would definitely. This is not where I'd go. Yeah.
Nope.
No.
What about their wet food?
So we see. So meat byproducts. There it is. I have no idea what meat. So whenever I see that with a company, I don't like it. They're doing it very cheap. You have no idea the sourcing. They would have no idea if you ask them, what is the traceability of your proteins? They'd have no idea. And so this is
IBS are such like a big, like they throw so many diagnoses in there. So what if it is a food sensitivity and you're literally giving them prescription food with no idea what meat?
Well, and here's the thing. So another reason why these companies will keep it generic is they change the formula based on what they can get their hands on.
Right.
What's the flavor of today? No idea. What died on the side of the road? I don't know. But that's what's in the food. And so this is also, especially for inflammatory bowel disease, where you have to, a lot of times these pets they should be on a limited ingredient diet. And if we're feeding them something meat and we have no idea what protein, and this is where it goes back to like food therapy principles. Like a lot of times these cats, like if we're feeding a lamb diet that's very warming and they need to be on turkey, which is cooling, this is going to screw up everything. And you're going to be stuck on this vicious cycle once again, where everything is inflamed, you're not getting resolution. And then also like you're just stuck. And a lot of times these cats end up, and same with dogs with IBD, they end up on like 5 different immunosuppressive drugs, and you're still getting problems. And it could be because we're feeding this food. Rice is high in arsenic. Yeah. Like that's not helping. So there's the soy protein isolate. There's some turkey. We have our oat hulls, and then we have artificial and natural flavors, whatever that is. And carrageenan, IBD, and we have carrageenan. Like it's like, what is going on? So, and then we have the vitamin K synthetic. And so you're better off feeding one of the other wet food, non-prescription foods we showed, to be honest.
This is their non-prescription food.
So here's another one, wheat gluten. I mean, gluten's going to increase what we call leaky gut, inflammation in the gut. Meat byproducts, liver, fish, soy flour. It just gets like, it's all bad. I know it's not a prescription diet, but you can see they're pretty similar. And so rather than if added color, so, if I had to pick one and you're on like a budget, you might as well pick the non-prescription wet food, and you're probably going to get the same results. And, looking at that, I just think it's,
Well, and I also feel like we hear this heartbreaking story over and over again that their cat has been diagnosed with kidney disease, IBD, or, this urinary problem that keeps going. And I think that it makes sense that we have such short lifespans. Obviously, there's a lot that plays into that. But once we start treating for something, it's especially when you see those kidney diets, It makes sense that we're looking at a very short amount of time by trying to treat it that way instead of looking at what their bodies need to help heal themselves.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think the biggest thing, so if you have a cat that has IBD, number one, make sure you're checking the vitamin like B12. You're doing a GI panel so if you're in the States, Texas A&M GI panel, you need to know, is there small intestinal bacterial overgrowth? You need to know what the B12 levels are. I also highly recommend checking vitamin D levels. And that has been a game changer for a lot of my patients because we have a malabsorption issue. That's what inflammatory bowel disease is. The body's not going to be able to absorb those vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. And so we need to know, where are we deficient? And then we also need to be working on optimizing gut health. So for a lot of these cats, especially if they're on steroids or other medications, using probiotics like your Saccharomyces boulardii, using things like slippery elm to calm down that inflammation, provide a good food source for the good bacteria to help feed them. But there's a lot of different things we can do. Colon Rescue from Animal Essentials is a great brand that you can use that helps for constipation or diarrhea. And looking at that and then removing this junk, we have to remove this, or else we are not going to fix a gut health issue by feeding foods that are creating gut health inflammation.
Right.
And we've got one more slide, and this, I think, just for comparison's sake, this is human grade.
Yeah. So this is a brand that's fairly new actually on the market, but very well known, I guess you'd say. They have it's a cooked food. So we wanted to show a difference between a human grade fresh food versus all of these highly processed foods to give people another option. And we can say this is Smalls, which we haven't tried ourselves, but it is it's a pretty well-known fairly new brand out there that is getting makes
some really great. I mean, we're hearing a lot of great feedback
from
but
them.
I think, as you mentioned earlier, the percentage, when we're looking at the ingredients, especially for those dry food diets, the percentage of, they're listed in percentage of concentration in the food. So when you see like, chicken somewhere up there, you realize that's before that was weighed wet, before it was put into the food, which is why it dropped so far down, which is why that ingredient list is not honest. This, in contrast, I think it's fascinating to see that when you add up the actual animal, the meat, you're looking at 86% human grade meat and organs in this food.
Yep. That right there is a species appropriate diet for a cat. So what we're doing, yes, there are still some like synthetic vitamins and minerals to fill in the gaps. That's important. Sometimes they're needed, but they're using chicken liver, they're using chicken heart, they're using the organ meat. So once again, healthy byproducts to help formulate and balance that diet. And so this is where it gets really powerful. And keep in mind that difference between human grade versus feed grade. Pet foods are feed grade. They are not made for human consumption. You would be able to eat this. So, that's the thing. You could eat this yourself and it's okay. It's a human grade ingredients and all of that. And one of the things I think a lot of people and even veterinarians don't realize is that there are actually more recalls for things like salmonella from kibble foods than raw diets.
Oh yeah.
So there's a lot of fear around raw food. And if you're ever worried about raw food, or you're in a household where someone's immunosuppressed, or you just you're uncomfortable with it, you can always lightly cook foods, or you can get something like the freeze dried, or, Raised Right has a lightly cooked option. That's a great brand. And so you don't always have to go raw, but I think it's important to see the difference in these ingredients. And then this is also why when you switch your cats over to a food like this, a lot of those diseases, those symptoms go away. And your cat feels better. You see their coat quality looks a lot better. So that's very, very important. And it's not always easy. Once your cat's been on I've been there personally, like for those kibble addicted cats, this looks great. And this is like a goal for a lot of people, but sometimes getting your cats to transition over can be a longer battle. So just stick with it and, do a slow transition. I know both Jay and Adrian have amazing tips for those transitioning cats also. So follow that. But this would always be the goal, is how can we get more to this? And if you can't do this all the time due to cost or whatever reason, try to do this at least a couple times a week. And that small change will add up to huge health benefits for your pet over time.
That's so well said. I think that that's a wall people run into, that they think, well, I can't afford to do this. There's just no way I can make, but it is about recognizing baby steps, little bits.
The studies are amazing when it comes to, replacing just 20% of your cat's kibble or wet food with fresh food, and how just a little bit can go a really long way. And you don't have to start, just jumping in. You can start, and many cats, you have to really do it a slow transition anyway. But, based on your budget, if you can add in a little bit of fresh meat, a little bit of fresh meat is really the best, liver, organs, things like that, and into, your cat's meals a few times a week, even, it's going to make a bigger difference.
We're talking about
help with the transition.
Smalls here. And Robin said, when I lick my finger when feeding this to the kids, it tastes pretty good. It's not something you would probably do with some of the other.
Hopefully that's cooked, right? Robin, we don't want anyone to get sick.
So we've gone way over our hour with you, and you are so generous with us with your time. So I'll just ask. I think there's a few questions. Maybe
let's go through a couple of questions.
Okay.
Are you able
to see them?
Where do we start? I'll go through. I'll blast through Thomas's stuff. So.
Yeah.
How do we get rid of Thomas?
I was trying to, let's go back to the beginning.
Yeah. Lynette has a question. They moved in September.
A urinary blockage on November 10th, and then again on November 25th. His vet put him on a strictly RX urinary diet. His vet is not open to anything other than that RX diet.
So what I'd recommend, stress, right? The move, there's a lot of stress there. And the biggest thing I'd be looking at is, I don't know if that's a kibble food or if that's the RX food. I mean, what you could always do is transition to the RX wet food. Like we mentioned, that will still be better than the dry food. But here's the thing, I'm not saying to go against your vet. However, the biggest thing is that we're giving recommendations. I know not everyone follows what I recommend all the time, and that's okay. I want people to feel comfortable with what they're doing. And I think every single veterinarian should make the recommendation and give that option. But if it's something that the client is not comfortable with, we need to be open to that. And so Lynette, I think having that conversation again, maybe bringing in some of these other ingredient lists and seeing his thoughts. If that's the case where he's so close-minded to everything, if you're able to find an alternative vet, because that's the thing. A lot of pet parents here want an integrative approach, and it can be a battle if your vet's not open or they're demeaning to you, and it can be really, really hard and already a stressful situation. But you could always add in other wet foods, kind of going off of some of the principles we talked about, and also using looking at what's going on in the environment. Am I meeting those needs of my cat, reducing stress? Do they have a safe space? Do they have all the things that are necessary to help them through this? And then adding in natural anti-inflammatory supplements that are going to help rebalance the body and get him into a better state to keep him from getting blocked again. And the biggest thing, one of the things that one of my clients will do is they'll have urine pH strips too, so you could check that. So checking that at home, you can get an idea, are we going above that pH of 7 for those struvite crystals? I'm assuming that's what was happening because that's the most common. And trying to keep our cats in that 6.5 range for the pH. And you'll get a better idea too. The dry food keeps your cats in an alkaline rich urine. The pH is too high. High carb diets drive the urine pH up. That's why we see struvite crystals. When we bring that back down, those crystals actually dissolve naturally. So that's where your higher protein foods will actually bring that urine pH into the more normal range. Yeah. So I think just because one person's against something doesn't mean that that's the law of the land. And I think if Lynette, you're feeling like there's a better way forward and you want to try something different, just be open and honest with your vet and say, I'm going to do this. And if things go wrong, okay, I'll be back. But,
And I really like the idea of
Well
the
said.
urine pH strips. We do that. We did that when our cat was going through. He was on steroids, and that was what was causing more urinary issues. And he's a high stress cat, so we would. And you can get urine strips anywhere. You can get them. We got them on Amazon. We recommend, because it's kind of hard to catch your cat sometimes while they're peeing. Just put like a thin layer of the litter in the box so that it's not all absorbed immediately, so that you can check it. But I think that, yes, we have to get to the root of the matter. Lynette, last week, we were live with Dr. Katie, as well as Julianne Thorne and Pam Roussel, and we discussed everything stress. And I think getting to the root of the matter is very important. And they all had so many amazing ideas on and suggestions on how to help your cats with stress.
And that was a roundtable that we did. You can go back and watch that.
Yeah,
on our YouTube,
you can go back and watch it.
Facebook.
Yeah, on YouTube or Facebook.
But really helpful information from everyone there.
That was our doorbell. No big deal. We don't. We're sitting right here, but we don't answer the door. Okay. Hyperthyroid group. Oh, okay. That was
Dr. Lori Kozer in the house. Wise words from Dr. Katie. Yes. My cat, hey, Paul Bear. Oh, there's Alberto. Sorry.
Susan said, is anyone finding more veterinarians seeking knowledge from a nutritionist standpoint? I think that it is actually. I think that more veterinarians, especially the younger generation of veterinarians, they're starting to learn a lot more, and so there's just a lot more information out there now than there was 10 or 20 years ago even. So I think that I think I'm an optimist, but I do think that the world is slowly changing, and I just wish that we could, we need medicine and we need nutrition, right? And I kind of wish that we could just, veterinarians could say, balance. I don't really know a whole lot about diet, but here's a nutritionist that I know and trust, and you should talk to this person about diet, or include more studies and courses in veterinarian school about real nutrition.
Yeah, here's something that is really positive though, is I agree. I think I try to think what we're doing is changing the world, and it's slowly gaining momentum. And there's a lot of amazing vets prior to my time that have laid that foundation and have done amazing things to set it up to make it easier for us coming up. And I do get a lot of through social media from veterinarians and veterinary students that want to learn more and asking for resources. And so that's really, really exciting. And also what I've noticed too, especially in the last 6 months, is I actually have other veterinarians where their clients were doing telehealth consultations, and they're seeing the positive results where they were stuck and they want appointments for their own pets, and they start referring more people. And so they want to learn more and see how this whole system works. So I do think there are a lot more people coming up, which is good. There's just a lot of pets out there, and there's not enough of us right now, but I think it is changing. And the other thing too, is a lot of us find this way of medicine either because of a health issue we've gone through or a partner's gone through and our pets, and we get stuck, right? And there's nothing else left. And then we find this other world of medicine. Then on the human side, I think hopefully as other vets that maybe aren't open to this, if they're seeing there's this movement on the human side, it may open their eyes up to oh, well, why aren't we doing this on the pet side? And why are we recommending processed food diets for the life of our pets when we're the only profession that does that? So I think hopefully some of the stories will change. Some of the old school beliefs will die out, and then it'll just be changed into this integrative approach to helping pets. And that's where the power is, in healing them and preventing disease.
Yep.
Oh, well said.
Very well said. Okay. Tony said, can a high quality canned cat food for a hyperthyroid cat be given if the ingredients include dry kelp?
So that'll depend. I mean, you'd have to be a little bit careful because you'd want to know the iodine level requirements are actually really, they're higher than what they need to be for cats. So especially for hyperthyroid cats. So I'd call the company and see what those levels are, and potentially maybe work with someone and just get some advice on what would be a best diet for your cat. Because I don't want to say, yeah, go ahead, and I have no idea what brand you choose, and then it causes a health issue. So I think maybe finding someone to help with that would be good.
Yeah.
That's another thing I don't think that, well, I think that can really help empower people is we can literally pick up the phone and call these companies.
Right.
I think that's something that we didn't do until much later. I mean, we had cats that were 10, 12, 15 years old. I mean, before we really started looking into this. And I think it's so empowering just to remind people, hey, pick up the phone and ask,
Yeah.
where is this sourced? How is this made? Or whatever the questions may be.
And it was interesting how many could not answer those questions,
Or
and how that was a deciding factor of, okay, we're not going to feed this food, even if it was, highly, recommended by someone we trusted.
a clever thing that a lot of these big companies will do will be like, yes, we'll refer you to our media department. We're like, we're asking about sourcing. They're like, why would you? It's very, very interesting.
It is very
One of the things too you'll find is they'll say they have a nutritionist on board, and the nutritionist is in like their marketing company, so they don't even formulate the diets or have anything to do with it. So there's a list of questions you can ask pet food companies. If you go to petfoodindustry.com and you go to Ryan, oh God, what's his last name?
Yamka?
Yes, Ryan Yamka. And he actually, one of his articles on there that's free to the public is at like what questions you should ask the pet food companies.
That's brilliant.
Yes.
I love it. So
Wonderful.
empowering.
Okay. So I think Thomas is kind of taking up everything. Marilyn had a question about phosphate binders, and I think Madison had a question, about phosphorus binders. So for cats with kidney disease, a lot of times, I think there's like 2 brands out there, but they recommend phosphorus binders added to the food. We've used that before as well, but not religiously. But what do you know about phosphorus binders, and is it?
So Madison kind of is asking the same question. If you can see the comments.
So with your kidney disease, this is where it's important to know where are the phosphate levels in my cat. And if they're normal, I wouldn't necessarily reach for a phosphate binder. What I would be tracking, and to go more with like Madison's question too, about, do I do a phosphate binder than just feed them whatever food? I would feed the foods that you're looking at feeding, and I would recheck and see what's it doing to the phosphate level. So we can always, the good thing is those phosphate binders can work pretty well. And I know like with Madison's cat, like sometimes they can be picky. So the less we have to add in potentially will make a bigger difference. Because if we're looking at transitioning to a more species appropriate diet, I don't necessarily want to add in drugs and medications and supplements if we're not at that stage where we need to. So I'd be looking at, okay, how do we transition to maybe, especially if we're going from a kibble diet, right? How do we get them to a more species appropriate, like raw food diet, if we can? And that's going to be better absorbed, better utilized by the body. It's going to support reducing inflammation naturally. It's just going to help that cat. And you may not need a phosphate binder, because I find a lot of times just by doing that, you reverse a lot of that kidney disease.
Yeah.
Just by getting them on the right food and getting them hydrated.
Yeah, we were able to stop kidney disease in 2 of our cats, and we did that through diet and supplementation. But what we had learned at the time was that the bone-in raw food was harder on the kidneys. So we switched to an eggshell calcium raw food. So it replaced with eggshell calcium. And I believe that really contributed to the stopping of the kidney progression.
Yes. So you'll see that on the ingredient list as calcium carbonate. I think one of the lists, actually, it was calcium carbonate was on there. So that would be something where I'd be 100%, because that's going to be like low phosphate. So it's perfect for cats with kidney disease. So you could always look on that ingredient list, like for Madison, for Marilyn. And then you want to be rechecking anyways to see if what you're doing, what you're feeding is affecting the BUN creatinine, your phosphate, urine concentration. Make sure you're doing urinalysis. You can add on SDMAs to actually see what's the filtration rate of the kidneys. It gives you a lot better idea of what's happening versus just relying on BUN and creatinine, which requires 75% of those nephrons to not be working well. So we want to know sooner than that. So that's where the SDMA is really helpful. But I think with phosphate binders, I have nothing, like they're very helpful. They can, there is a time and a place to use them when we need to. But if we haven't switched over to different foods and we're just like reaching for them just because we know BUN and creatinine are a bit high, that's not where I would go first. I would look at supporting the kidneys.
A bit about the because I meant to write it down. You were talking about an herb that is really great at
Oh,
getting
Romania.
Romania.
Yeah, so there's a Chinese herbal formula called Romania 8 combination. That's a really common one that's used for a lot of cats. Now, if your cat tends to overheat easily, or, you know, it's not one that like lies on the heater vent in the winter or lays in the sun all the time, if your cat's hot, that's not a formula that's the best for them because it is a bit warming. So that's where Chinese herbal medicine, I don't always recommend like just going and getting the herbs and putting them on it. But the RX renal support from RX vitamins does have a little bit of Romania in it. And then it has other nutraceuticals to help. And that's where the power of herbs and plants, where we can get the synergistic properties of that plant working together, can help reverse some of that damage or help with increasing blood flow, provide those natural anti-inflammatories. You know, omega-3 essential fatty acids, if your cat's not already getting that, we need to bump that up. That can help. There's a lot of studies behind that. Your B12, so your B complexes, those B vitamins are really powerful. I know you ladies have like an antioxidant formula that you can add into these foods to really help boost that cat's overall health. So that's where I tend to go first. I try to limit the amount of drugs, the conventional medications that we need to use, because we can get so much more benefits and better results from using a lot of these natural holistic remedies first. And if you're able to, and you have a cat with kidney disease, see if you can get in with an acupuncturist. Like there's specific points that we can use to help with kidney chi tonic and supporting digestion and just helping the overall chi and energy of your cat. So there's a lot of different and that's just like, we're not even like covering the list of all the natural remedies that you can use for your cats. But that's where I go first. And then I add in those stronger medications, drugs if we need to. But that prescription food is usually nowhere near where I'm going. If like it's not needed unless, like I said, where we're at like late stage kidney disease and it's like the creatinine and BUN are through the chart. And even then I'm like we're creating like homemade egg diets, and you know, there's a lot of different ways we can actually use real food to get the biologically available proteins in.
Yeah, it was actually that was the tipping point for us to switch over to a raw food diet, was when our oldest at the time was diagnosed with early stages kidney disease. And we've been studying it and we have been like thinking about it, and we were like, but we didn't know. She thought she was sure that we were going to kill him. And I was like,
I know it's scary though, right? That's the thing.
We've had kibble for years and years.
Yeah,
and we learned about like how cats need a moisture rich diet. We switched over to a wet food diet, and then it was like getting them to a raw food diet was just kind of scary until we got that diagnosis. And that was I was like, that day I was like, we're going to do this. We're doing it now. We're switching them over. And
scary day. We would never go back. But it is, I mean, it's understandable. We're conditioned to be freaked out about raw food, you know,
right.
Well, and you have like, you read, you're going to kill your pets. You have your veterinarian potentially telling you that too.
Right.
And so that's really hard to hear. I mean, I've been in that position, you know, I've heard that from the human side with my own husband, and going through, he has the IBD, and, you know, being told like, you're stupid for doing natural stuff. Like literally, like we've been laughed at for like even trying natural things and doing, you know, using food as medicine. And I'm like, you're a gastroenterologist? Like, who are you? Like, what is happening right now? And so it's the thing is that I always say, and this is something that I live by also, we don't always have all the information, but I think it's important to ask the questions, get the feedback, hear what people have to say. You don't have to make a decision right then and there. You don't have to buy the prescription food. All you have to say is, you know, I appreciate your time. Thank you for going through that with me. I'm going to take a couple days just to kind of go through everything, and I'll let you know what I decide. Because at the end of the day, you are in control of your cat's health and what you decide to do. And just because I mentioned something doesn't mean you have to do it. If it doesn't feel right or you want to go a different path, that is okay. Yep. And so I think that's very, very important for your own health and for your cat's health to keep in mind.
Yes, we are our cat's best advocate, and we can't put that stress on the veterinarians to be our cat's best advocate either. You know, we have to take control of that. And if it were a human child, we would absolutely take control of our human child's health as well, right?
I do think it's so valuable, though. I think, we're all kind of conditioned in one way or another to hear from a veterinarian that it's okay to make your own decisions.
Yeah.
It's kind of bizarre that we have to be reminded that it's okay to make up our own mind. But honestly, I feel like very often we want to hear that from someone either that maybe has more education than us or has, I've always felt so intimidated going into the vet's office. Not Jay. She's a handful at the vet's office, but I feel, a little nervous to ask questions, especially if it's put out there in a way that's just matter of fact, or I would feel dumb, like asking me what CRP was earlier. I wouldn't have, I'm just naturally not comfortable like that. So I appreciate you reminding all of us that it's okay to make our own decisions, that you don't have to do exactly what your veterinarian says, what you say, what we recommend, recommendations and all that are out there. And it's up to us to make those decisions.
But ask the question so that we can make a better informed decision.
Yep. And, we're all doing the best with what we can with the knowledge we have at the time. And that goes along with your veterinarians. And hopefully, like everyone here is doing amazing. They're learning, they're educating themselves. And that's the most important thing, is that never stops. Because there's lots of things I don't know that I hope will continue to learn and grow, and my ability to help and serve pets. And it's the same for pet parents. Like I've had some amazing pet parents through the years that were very, very knowledgeable and did deep dives into like kidney disease. And I learned a lot from them. Like, it was amazing. And it was like, so that's the thing, just because I'm a veterinarian, it does not give me that label that I know everything. And if we start thinking that we know everything, we're dead in the water, right? We're stuck. That is when things end. And so we're all here to learn, to grow and help one another and like be the best advocates for our pets. And I think that is so important to remember, that we may not have all the answers to all the questions, but we need to keep asking the questions. That is so important, and continuing to be the advocate for our pets.
Yeah,
love it.
Absolutely.
Love it.
Learn,
I know
share, and grow.
We are way over on time. Can you please let everyone know where to find you, any exciting things that are going on? I know that you are doing some amazing things with pet parents, but for everyone who's like, oh my gosh, don't let her leave, where can we go find her? Give us your info.
Yeah, you can find me at thenaturalpetdoctor.com. Also go check out our social media. On Facebook, it's The Natural Pet Doctor. On Instagram, The Natural Pet Doctor. On YouTube, it's Dr. Katie Woodley, The Natural Pet Doctor. We have a free webinar on Monday, which is tomorrow, about like the 5 pillars of health and the key things that you can start doing, some simple tips for dogs and cats. So make sure you register for that. You can go to our Facebook page and there'll be a link that you can register for. I believe it's a green post. So just look for that. If you have any trouble, just send me a message. I'm more than happy to forward that link to you. But yeah, go there. We have lots of free content, and we do nutritional plans and hair tissue mineral analysis tests. We do telehealth consultations, but we have a lot of free content so you can keep learning and growing. Every Friday, we do a coffee talk with the doc on Facebook and Instagram too, on various topics, or just like Q&As with pet parents like yourself. So make sure you check out that also.
Awesome.
I love it.
Awesome.
It's amazing to me, the stamina that you have to keep.
I know. Well, we delayed this because I was a little broken. So, but we're back.
I love you so much. Thank you so much for all this time. Thank all of you for joining us and making this community just our most favorite place to be, and for loving your cats the way that you guys do, and for learning with us all the time. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank
we'll
you.
see you in about 20 minutes.
Yes.
Love you guys.
Love you guys.
Bye all.